couldn't believe our luck when we found the perfect place for our family vacation. A charming cottage tucked away in a quaint village surrounded by lush woods. The host, Luis, had glowing reviews, and the photos of the property showcased a cozy interior that seemed ideal for a peaceful retreat. As we settled into the cottage, the excitement of our vacation began to fade into the tranquility of the surroundings. The first few nights were blissful, with the soothing sounds of nature lulling us to sleep. But on the fourth night, everything changed. I was woken up in the middle of the night by a faint voice coming from our daughter Emma's room. My wife Sarah stirred next to me, and we both listened intently. The words were soft and muffled, but they were undoubtedly Emma's. "Who is she talking to?" Sarah whispered, her voice tinged with concern. "I don't know, maybe she's talking in her sleep," I replied, trying to reassure myself as much as Sarah. Despite our attempts to shake off the unease, neither of us could fall back asleep. The following night, the eerie occurrence repeated itself. Sarah and I exchanged worried glances before deciding to check on Emma. With hesitant steps, we approached her room, the door creaking softly as we pushed it open. To our bewilderment, we found Emma fast asleep, her peaceful face illuminated by the soft moonlight. The room was still and silent, with no signs of anyone else being present. "Emma, honey, were you talking to someone last night?" I gently asked the next morning, trying not to alarm her. "Yes, Daddy. I was talking to Luis," Emma replied with a bright smile. "Luis? Who is Luis, sweetheart?" Sarah inquired, her brows furrowing. "He's the man who comes to visit me at night. He's very nice," Emma said matter-of-factly. Both Sarah and I exchanged worried glances, trying to process Emma's words. We hadn't met any other guests during our stay, and we couldn't understand who Luis could be. "Emma, you must have dreamt it. There's no one else in the house," I assured her gently, hoping to dispel her imagination. But Emma seemed insistent. She described Luis in detail. A tall man with a big smile who wore old-fashioned clothes. The more she talked about him, the more uneasy we became. That night, we decided to sleep in the same room with Emma, hoping our presence would comfort her. Yet, despite our efforts, we were awakened once again by her hushed conversations with Luis. The fear and concern grew, and we knew we had to leave the cottage immediately. As soon as morning broke, we packed our bags, trying to hide our growing unease from Emma. But the tension was palpable as we rushed to the car. Just as we were about to drive away, Sarah suggested calling the police to report the unsettling events. Within minutes, the police arrived at the cottage. We explained the situation to them, recounting Emma's conversations with Luis. They promised to search the property and ensure our safety. As the police conducted a thorough search, my heart raced with fear. My instincts told me something was terribly wrong, and I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. Finally, a detective emerged from the attic with a grim expression. "We found him," he said solemnly. Sarah and I exchanged terrified glances as we followed the detective into the attic. There, sitting alone with a sinister smile, was Luis, the host we had trusted. My heart sank as I realized that Emma's encounters with Luis were not imaginary. The detective explained that Luis had been secretly living in the attic, spying on us, and gaining access to Emma's room through a small hole he had drilled in the floor. The police also discovered a stash of rope and duct tape in the attic, confirming our worst fears. They apprehended Luis and took him into custody. We learned that he had a history of stalking and had used his position as a host to prey on unsuspecting families. The revelation sent shivers down our spines, and we couldn't fathom how close we had come to danger. The police assured us that Luis would face the consequences of his actions, but the trauma of the experience stayed with us long after we returned home. We now view every place with a sense of caution and vigilance. Our once beloved family vacation turned into a chilling nightmare, a reminder that evil can lurk in even the most picturesque settings. The memory of Luis and his sinister smile haunts our dreams, serving as a stark reminder to always trust our instincts and to prioritize safety above all else. As a host for a vacation rental website, I took pride in providing my guests with a memorable and enjoyable experience. The property, a charming cabin nestled in the woods, had received excellent reviews from previous visitors. However, one chilling night would forever change how I viewed my role as a host. It was a peaceful evening when I received an unexpected call from the guests staying at the cabin. Their voices trembled as they described hearing footsteps in the kitchen, despite being certain they were the only ones there. "Please call the police immediately," I urged them, my heart pounding with concern. Without a second thought, I hung up and dialed the emergency line myself. I couldn't shake off the unsettling feeling, so I decided to drive to the cabin immediately to ensure my guests' safety. As I sped through the winding roads toward the cabin, I couldn't help but wonder what could be causing such a disturbance. Had an animal somehow found its way into the kitchen? Or perhaps the guests' imaginations were playing tricks on them? The dark, dense forest surrounding the cabin seemed to close in around me as I arrived at the property. It was eerily silent, and the beam of my flashlight barely pierced the veil of shadows. Approaching the front door, I listened carefully for any sounds. To my surprise, there was nothing but silence. My heart raced as I unlocked the door and cautiously stepped inside. "Hello? Is anyone here?" I called out, my voice echoing through the empty rooms. The cabin was still, the air heavy with an unsettling stillness. I made my way to the kitchen, finding no signs of intrusion or disturbance. It was as if the guests' claims had vanished into thin air. Concerned, I climbed the stairs to the bedroom where the guests had reported hearing the noises. To my astonishment, I found the phone lying on the bed with the emergency number 911 dialed but not yet placed. I couldn't fathom how this had happened. "Hello?" I called out again, growing more anxious with each passing moment. Suddenly, a chill swept through the room, and a sense of foreboding enveloped me. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and I felt a shiver of unease run down my spine. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but I couldn't abandon my guests. I searched the entire cabin, but there was no sign of them. It was as if they had vanished without a trace. Panicking, I dialed the guest number, but it went straight to voicemail. Fear gnawed at me as I left urgent messages, pleading for them to call me back. Minutes that felt like hours passed, and the sound of sirens finally echoed through the forest as the police arrived at the scene. I greeted them with a mix of relief and worry, desperate for answers. "We received a call about possible intruders in this area," one of the officers explained, "but we haven't found anything suspicious so far." As the officers combed through the cabin and the surrounding area, my anxiety grew. I recounted the guests' call, their concerns about the footsteps in the kitchen, and how they had attempted to call for help. As the night wore on, the search continued, but there was still no sign of the guests. The officers were puzzled, unable to find any evidence of foul play or forced entry. It was then that one of the officers made a chilling discovery: a broken basement window. My heart sank as I followed them downstairs, fearing what we might find. Next to the shattered glass, we found a note, written hastily and with a sense of urgency. It read, "Bye." It sent shivers down my spine, the simplicity of the message contrasting with the gravity of the situation. The officers expanded their search, checking every inch of the cabin and the surrounding woods. But it was as if the guests had vanished into thin air. The silence was deafening, and the forest seemed to hold its secrets close. Days turned into weeks, and the search for the missing guests continued relentlessly. I cooperated fully with the police, providing any information that could help them find the couple. But despite their efforts, there were no leads, no clues to shed light on their mysterious disappearance. As time passed, the cabin became a haunting reminder of that fateful night. The sense of unease lingered, and I could never shake off the feeling that I had failed as a host and as a protector of my guests. The missing guests' families were devastated, their lives forever altered by the inexplicable void left by their loved one's disappearance. My heart ached for them, and I couldn't help but carry the weight of guilt for the events that had transpired under my care. The police investigation continued, but the case turned colder with each passing day. The trail seemed to vanish, and the mystery deepened, leaving everyone with more questions than answers. To this day, the cabin remains vacant, its once warm and welcoming aura now shrouded in sorrow and uncertainty, and I no longer host on the website. As a nature enthusiast, I often sought solace in the wilderness during vacations. One summer, I decided to explore a secluded forested area for a much-needed break from the hustle of city life. With no hotels nearby, I relied on a website to find suitable accommodation. The listing that caught my eye was for a quaint cabin tucked away deep in the woods. The photos displayed a cozy interior surrounded by lush greenery, promising the perfect escape. Without hesitation, I booked the cabin for a week-long stay. Arriving at my destination, I followed the directions provided by the host, taking winding paths and narrow trails until I finally arrived at the cabin. It was everything I had hoped for, picturesque and serene. The host, a friendly local named Mark, greeted me warmly and handed over the keys, providing some tips about the area before leaving. The first few days were idyllic. I spent my time hiking, exploring, and immersing myself in nature's beauty. The nights were peaceful, with the gentle sounds of the forest lulling me to sleep. But as the days passed, subtle occurrences began to gnaw at my tranquility. One evening, as I was sitting by the fire, I noticed strange noises outside, a rustling of leaves and the occasional snap of a twig. I dismissed it as woodland creatures and continued reading, but the sounds persisted, growing louder and more erratic. My nerves on edge, I convinced myself that my mind was playing tricks on me. The following night, the noises returned, and this time, there was no denying their unsettling nature. I ventured outside with a flashlight, hoping to catch a glimpse of the curious intruders. The light revealed nothing but the dense wall of trees, their branches swaying in the breeze. An eerie sensation crept over me, and I hurried back inside, locking the cabin securely. The cabin in the woods exuded tranquility, but as my vacation days passed, the serenity slowly turned to unease. Strange occurrences like misplaced belongings and faint footsteps unsettled me. One restless night, unable to shake the feeling of being watched, I decided to set up a camera in the living room. The next morning, as I reviewed the footage, my heart nearly stopped. There on the screen, I saw a man standing over me while I slept. His face was twisted with a malevolent grin as he gazed at me. Shocked and horrified, I watched him move with unnerving grace, disappearing underneath the bed before reappearing to continue his voyeuristic vigil. I trembled as I realized I had shared the cabin with an intruder, someone who had been lurking in the shadows, observing my every move. The safety of the remote cabin was now a cruel facade, and I knew I had to act quickly. Without a second thought, I grabbed my belongings and ran out of the cabin, my heart pounding with fear. I dialed the emergency number and explained the situation to the police, my voice quivering as I recounted the nightmarish discovery. The police arrived swiftly, and with cautious steps they entered the cabin to investigate. Their expressions grew solemn as they discovered traces of the intruder's presence. A knife was found hidden among the kitchen utensils, and the remnants of food leftovers and water suggested he had been living there for some time. The officer leading the search, Detective Stevens, discovered a hidden nook underneath the bed, obscured by a loose floorboard. There they found a small stash of personal items and photographs of me, taken without my knowledge. It was clear that the intruder had been obsessively monitoring me, knowing my every move. As the investigation unfolded, I learned that the intruder had evaded the police for years, leaving no trail and committing crimes that had baffled the authorities. He had been living a transient life, blending in with the wilderness and targeting isolated cabins to avoid detection. The police assured me they would do everything possible to apprehend the man, but it would take time. I felt an unsettling mix of fear and relief, knowing that he was still out there somewhere, eluding capture. For the rest of my stay, I stayed in a different location, surrounded by other tourists and the comforting bustle of civilization. But the peace I once found in nature had been shattered, replaced by a deep-seated apprehension. The rest of my vacation was marred by constant glances over my shoulder and sleepless nights haunted by the memory of that chilling footage. Back home, I installed advanced security measures ensuring my safety would never again be compromised. I cooperated fully with the police investigation, sharing any information that might help them in their pursuit of the intruder. Months passed, and the news broke that the elusive intruder had finally been apprehended. I felt a sense of closure, knowing he would no longer be a threat to anyone else. The quaint place we had booked for our weekend getaway seemed like the perfect escape, a rustic cabin surrounded by nature's beauty. My wife Emily and I were eager to leave behind the hustle and bustle of the city and enjoy some quality time together. Little did we know that our idyllic retreat would soon turn into a nightmarish experience we would never forget. As we settled into the cozy cabin, a sense of tranquility washed over us. The warm, flickering fireplace cast a soothing glow, and the soft creaking of the floorboards beneath our feet added to the rustic charm. We spent the evening playing board games, cherishing each other's company, and savoring the peaceful atmosphere. However, as the night deepened, an unsettling feeling crept into our hearts. We both heard faint, inexplicable noises, muffled whispers that seemed to emerge from the shadows. At first, we dismissed them as the creaks and groans of an old cabin settling into the night, but the sounds persisted, growing louder and more distinct. "What was that?" Emily asked, her eyes wide with apprehension. "I'm not sure. It's probably just the wind," I replied, trying to reassure both of us. Yet, as much as we tried to ignore the noises, they persisted, echoing through the cabin and into our very souls. The darkness outside seemed impenetrable, and a chilling wind swept through the open window, sending a shiver down my spine. "We should check it out," Emily suggested, her voice trembling slightly. I nodded, trying to appear brave despite the fear gnawing at me. We decided to investigate the source of the mysterious sounds, cautiously making our way toward the basement door. Emily clung to my arm, and with hesitant steps we descended into the dimly lit depths below. As we reached the bottom of the stairs, a draft of cold air washed over us. The basement was filled with an eerie stillness, and the flickering light from the single bulb cast ominous shadows on the walls. We searched every corner, trying to find any signs of intruders or animals that might explain the noises. It was then that I noticed a glint of light coming from a small, tucked-away corner. As I approached, my heart pounded in my chest. There on the ground was a folded piece of paper with Emily's first name written on it in shaky handwriting. I picked it up with trembling hands, and the words on the paper sent chills down my spine. "Emily," I said, my voice trembling, "look at this." Emily's eyes widened as she read the note. "What does this mean? Who could have left this?" "I don't know, but we need to leave. Now," I said firmly, my protective instincts kicking in. We rushed back upstairs, our hearts racing with fear. Emily quickly packed our bags while I kept a watchful eye on the basement door. As we hurriedly gathered our belongings, I noticed that the window, which had been securely closed earlier, was now fully opened, swaying gently in the chilly night breeze. "There's no way someone could have gotten in through the window. It was latched shut," I said, my mind reeling with disbelief. "We need to leave. Let's get out of here," Emily urged, her voice trembling. Agreeing wholeheartedly, we fled from the cabin, leaving behind the disturbing note and the unsettling atmosphere. The darkness of the night seemed to engulf us as we rushed to our car, our hearts pounding with fear and confusion. As we drove away, I called the host to report the unsettling events and request a refund. The host seemed genuinely surprised and concerned, assuring us that nothing like this had ever happened before. Feeling unsafe and unwilling to risk another night in the cabin, we checked into a nearby hotel. Exhausted and on edge, we struggled to find sleep, our minds plagued by the mystery of the note and the sinister presence we felt in that cabin. The following day, the police investigated the cabin and found no evidence of forced entry. They questioned the host and any possible previous guests, but no concrete leads emerged. The mystery remained unsolved, and we were left to wonder if it was a cruel prank or something far more sinister. Thanks for watching the Haunted Sketchbook. Be sure to check out any of the videos on screen right now if you're planning on not sleeping tonight.